11. We crossed the river and continued slowly through uncharted fields. The horse moved gently as if deep in thought. We walked toward the horizon of mystery, which lay propped on starlight at the distant end of the dark. In the black solitude that covered us, the night breeze tickled our ears, while the flower essence, wet with night dew, wafted under our noses. I grew solemn in the breath-stopping aura of the sacred that filled the night with a fragrance, and in the energy and rest feeling that is in living things. God's holy providence caressed my body, creating a sense of the mystery that breathes over us. I felt the creative and destructive urges that govern things. I felt these forces within me. Death is not terror, but joy, the forces said. Death and annihilation are unbounded blessings, they whispered, sublime ecstasy, perfect grace. 12. The horse came to a small cabin. I got off, gently pushed open the brushwood gate, and went into the yard. I stood in faint moonlight in the yard and looked around. A single-paneled door opened. Sparrows chattered under the eaves. A young girl came out. She wore a ribbon in her hair. She went into the kitchen and returned with a gourd dipper. She came over to me and handed me the dipper. I took a few mouthfuls. The water tasted cold and sweet. My languid body cells woke up. The water filled me body and spirit. I went to give back the dipper, but the girl had disappeared. I put the dipper on the veranda and left the yard. 13. I mounted the horse and moved slowly away from the cabin. I didn't look back, but I felt the eyes of the girl looking at me from the cabin door. I sighed deeply. My eyes were wet. Cold turmoil whirled in my heart. Suddenly I was a boy again, filled with memories of running to the cabin. Yes, running toward that girl. And now all that sits on the horse is a bag of old bones and memories, a withered ghost, a dried out skin. "14. Star clusters were still scattered through the sky. We continued on through the fields. Overhead a sky of jeweled stars, underfoot the silent earth. Suddenly I had a sense of infinite benevolence, holy tolerance. I was nestling in the arms of God. I listened to my inner rhythms. My breathing was like the sound of eternity. It wrapped me snugly like a heavenly blanket. I entrusted myself to God's arms as if in a dream. I slept like a child on the breast, like a baby bird. I savored the taste of oblivience. 15. The horse stopped. Full moon. A one-story, dilapidated wine house stood in front. I got off the horse. The door was closed. A boisterous clamor came from within. I opened the wine house door and stepped inside. The customers, surprised by the sound of the door, stopped talking and turned to look at me. It was a fusty-smelling place with rough tables, a sort of cave structure with a gloomy atmosphere. The customers were all dressed shabbily like farmers. They looked at me with suspicion and distrust as if I were an uninvited guest intruding on a private gathering. Their eyes were docile but wary, honest but intense. I was different. I gave off a sense of inherent rejection, which they felt in my person and in the clothes I was wearing. My hair was white, brushed neatly back from the front, and I wore a dapper frock coat. 16. In an attempt to change the atmosphere, I called for an extra bottle of wine at every table. The best in the house, I said. A delighted older woman approached, plump-faced. She wore an apron and she had a scarf around her head. I couldn't say whether she was the madam of the wine house or the woman of the house. She directed me to a seat inside. I sat down on a wooden chair with no back. By now, the customers had forgotten me and were back to their old selves. They lifted their bowls with coarse, dark hands and talked among themselves. Perhaps one or two cast unfriendly glances at me, but even these soon looked away. An anchor without an anchor chain hung on one wall. An extra bottle arrived at every table. They poured the wine nonchalantly, filling each other's bowls and downing them in a single gulp. 17. I came out of the wine house and mounted the horse. I felt a little light-headed. The horse lifted its hooves and took a few strides forward. I looked up at the stars. The light of a myriad sparkling stars filled my eyes. Starlight flooded my sight. Are you aware of man's beauty? I muttered. Not the smile that appears to the eye, but the shadow of sadness within the eye. Are you aware of the beauty of existence? Not the strength apparent to the eye, but the weakness that human nature conceals within. I smiled gently. The sadness draped within me was not revealed. No one could see my turmoil. Deep night prevailed. The darkness was dyed a deeper blue. 18. The horse walked on through the dark. Its stride so gentle and sweet, I fell into reverie on its back. How can I describe the feeling? Something gracious and noble, not easily put into words. A sense of sublime beauty encircled me. The horse and I were no longer two. One and one had met in two. We had always been one. As life and death are not two. As bloom and wither are not two. As come and go are not two. As being and non-being are not two. So, too, the horse and I felt that we had always been one. 19. I was not afraid. I was content, at peace. The horse was God's messenger leading me to nirvana, and I was walking my last moments in this world. Scenes from my youth swept in front of me, closely followed by a favored phrase from the past. Heart, you must dream a holy revolution. It was a catchword of youth, a conviction, a pristine attachment. All my life I had dreamed a holy revolution, but nothing came of it. I achieved nothing. I reached nowhere. It was a false road, a vain dream, a floating cloud. And now, old and sick, having never realized my dream, I am approaching death. I confess readily. I have no regrets, no sadness, no feeling of failure. I dreamed a dream. I lived the dream, and I am dying with the dream. 20. I looked at the night sky. Flickering starlight smiles filtered into my eyes. I raised a hand toward the stars. A fallen star dropped into my palm. It was like a mysterious flower, glowing like a fairy in a children's story. A little later, I tossed the star back into the night sky. It hovered on the edge of the sky, blinked its starry eye, and looked down at me. A voice from an unknown world brushed past me. Who was it? I heard a whisper in my ear. You'll be a star, a star, a star.